So, szóval kell aktivizálni. Oké. Remélem rendben van akkor minden. So, dear friends, welcome in Budapest, and we are in a strange situation, in a strange position, because Willem, the high chief of the project, couldn't arrive at time because of the missed train connection or something like that. So our task, very short task, to welcome you here, welcome Budapest and the Institute of Social Sciences, Center for Social Sciences and Institute of Sociology, for whom Adrien is the director of the, and same way, leader of the Social Science Institute team in the project. She will give you some welcome sentences, not a full speech, because it's a hidden coming a little bit strange task to replace Willem, who is not replaceable, but we do our best.
Hi everybody, it's nice to have you here. We are very happy that you could make it, and we could make it at least not after 2 years maybe we could meet again. We are happy to have you here, and we tried everything to make you feel comfortable. Just some organizational matters. After this session, we will have a coffee break on the first floor, and then the bus will depart from here, and we will have a site visit, and after that a dinner. And if you have any questions, please feel free to approach us. There are several colleagues of us who will help you, and yeah, let's feel. Yeah, we are the local team, and yeah, enjoy your conference, enjoy your stay in Hungary. You are very welcome. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maura Farrell, and I'm from the National University of Ireland in Galway. And I am going to do a little bit of an introduction in relation to our conference and in relation to some of the work that's going to happen over the next 2 days. Unfortunately, William, who is our project lead, William should have been here, but it's slightly delayed, but I'm sure he will join us later on. So William from TU Delft is really our lead person. And so we'll just speak for a few moments in relation to the project overview and what's going to happen over the next couple of days. Presentation. Okay, good. Those are the minor technical difficulties we'll probably have over the next couple of days, but hopefully not too many. First of all, I want to really, sorry, I'm not moving. Okay, first of all, I absolutely want to welcome everybody here to the conference, everybody who's sitting in front of us, but also people who are watching online, project partners that are watching online, people who have joined us that are interested in rural research, who are interested in practitioners in and around rural activities. So all of those, it's just an absolute hearty welcome to you all. For us here, it's actually quite exciting for us to be here face to face. I think it's been nearly 2 years since we've had a face-to-face meeting with the group. So it's really interesting, and it's really good to see everybody again, how well everybody looks and how nobody has changed and nobody has aged in any way. So really, I suppose for the agenda over the next, we've got 2 to 3 days. We've got 2 days of a wonderful ruralization conference, and then we'll move into some meetings as well. So I suppose in relation to this morning, we've got some discussion that we'll be involved in. I'll be involved in myself and 2 colleagues with me from INUI Galway. And tomorrow we'll have 2 further discussions as well. Just let's look first of all in relation to where we're at with ruralization. Why ruralization? Why did we become involved? Why are we so, I suppose, enthused and engaged in this project? Really, for many of us, we could look across Europe and we could see that there's a real unequal development. There's an unequalization across our urban and rural centres, right across Europe. In every state in Europe, we have this inequality in relation to the urban and rural areas. And this starts with, I suppose, our population growth. In urban areas, we would have a 12% growth within our urban centres, where we would have, in some places in rural areas, a -7% growth. This also kind of really starts to look in relation to GDP. We'd have a much higher GDP in relation to rural areas than, or in urban areas than we have in rural areas. So from the get-go, you can see this unequal balance that's created in urban and rural centres. In relation to land, and a lot of our ruralization project also looked at access to land and looked at the way in which land is shared and the way in which land is controlled. And as you can see here, over 52% of EU land is controlled by just over 3% of EU farmers, which is a huge amount of land controlled by a small amount of people. And this creates a lot of issues. It creates issues around access to land for new people, new young farmers, new entrants into farming, new entrants into rural areas. We also see that over 76% of the EU's smallest farms are cultivated by 11% of EU land. Again, an inequality that exists right across many, many states across Europe. So within the ruralization project, what did we decide to do? What did we decide to propose? And really, we looked at ruralization as creating an equal balance between urban and rural, bringing the rural more towards that balanced situation that we have across Europe in relation to urban and rural areas. And we decided to do this by looking, first of all, at a foresight analysis to identify the opportunities. And then we were going to look at facilitating rural newcomers, new entrants into farming. Who were these new people that we could bring into rural areas? And how can we accommodate them within farming or within the broader rural context? So the tools that are needed to provide access to land, we looked at those. And over the next maybe year or so, we're going to look at the policy developments in and around all of this work that we have done and see, can we bring policy not just to national governments, but also to the Commission, and see, can we improve this unequal balance within a rural context. So this ruralization perspective, really what it's looking at is creating more opportunities for new generations. It's hoping that more young people will move into rural areas and less people will move out. It's also presuming and hoping that we have a relatively younger population. We're looking at a renewal of the population. And then within this circular motion, we're looking at more economic activities. So our ruralization perspective is very much based on this kind of circular kind of thinking. And here in front of us this morning, there's most or some or all of our 18 partners, some who are joining us online and some who are face-to-face. So a wonderful group of people who have really so far in this project have really put a huge amount of effort and work into bringing ruralization to the fore. And the work plan that we have in ruralization, it really looks at 6, maybe 7 work packages. And within those work packages, we have, I suppose, the framework for research and innovation, which we're going to discuss today, as well as the foresight analysis to identify opportunities. So this is one of the discussion groups that we're going to have this morning. And Within tomorrow, we're going to have 2 further discussion groups. And one of those is facilitating rural newcomers and looking at new entrants into farming. So we're going to have presentations and a discussion in and around this as well. And our final discussion tomorrow before we finish up is looking at, the tools that provide access to land. And within all of this context of ruralization then, how is the policy and the assessments going to come together? What are we going to see in relation to policy that we can equip ourselves to ensure, I suppose, that we can foresee this idea of ruralization? Even though communications and dissemination is there, really, it's a central part of everything we're doing. It's exactly what we're doing here over this 2 or 3 days, this idea of communications and dissemination. So again, our agenda is here over the next couple of days. I think on behalf of William, who has just arrived just as I finished, I want to again thank you all most sincerely for either joining us online or joining us here in person. It's really exciting to be here and to present what we found so far in relation to ruralization and what we hope to gain into the future. So as we say in Ireland, Gormina Magat, and I think we're actually continuing with myself. So if you don't mind, I will continue in the first discussion group this morning in relation to the first discussion in and around research and ruralization project. Not sure if I can continue with this. Go back. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I didn't find the presentation. Uh-oh. Because of this stupid tools, I didn't find. Yes. I did share it now. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we will continue with the first discussion group this morning in relation to framework for research and innovation. So this is very much wrapped around work package 3 of the ruralization project. And I'm going to present this morning. I'm going to start the presentation, and Louise Weir, who also works with us in UI Galway on the ruralization project, and Aisling, who is the postdoc as well on the ruralization project, will finish off on this presentation. So this is the way we're going to work it. So you get 3 of us for the price of 1 this morning on our presentation. Okay, so the presentation for the research and innovation, really, it will introduce the overall framework for research and innovation. But beyond this, I suppose, in the presentation, we don't intend to reflect too much maybe on the project's framework for research and innovation directly. I suppose this is more the internal logic in and around the project that enables the diverse areas from the newcomers to the access to land. It enables all of those to fit together. But instead, we're going to focus a little bit more on the key learnings, maybe some of the questions that have emerged from our work package 3 deliverables. And those questions maybe that link the wider questions of realizing ruralization. So I suppose more broadly, the presentation will also raise many questions that have emerged from our framing work on ruralization. But in raising many questions, it may also maybe look for more answers as well. But it will also reflect on the goals for this work package, and it'll try and maybe assess the existing knowledge and what gaps maybe that still exist in relation to the process of ruralization. So this is what we aim to do for this presentation between the three of us. So I suppose in looking at the overall aims of Work Package 3 are really to formulate a detailed conceptual guideline and an assessment framework for the project. This was what we aimed to do within Work Package 3. And it was really there to develop specific guidelines on research and innovation, not just for Work Package 3, but for Work Package 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then to integrate the results of the previous projects into the broader context of the ruralization project. So the work package is also where we selected the case studies and the regions for further reflections. Apologies. So the work package is also where the selection of case studies came about, but also the regions for further reflection. This also occurred within Work Package 3. So this was dealt with really as a centralized task, maybe to ensure the selection met with the specific work packages and the overall project aims and objectives, which we had to keep in mind on a constant basis. So when you look at ruralization, it really is focused on assessing and developing novel, new type of instruments and strategies and policies for rural regeneration and generation renewal. So its particular focus really is on rural foresight analysis, the future dreams of rural youth, which we've all worked quite well on, facilitating new rural newcomers and farm succession in Work Package 5, and new entrants into farming as well, and access to land in Work Package 6. So these diverse areas, I suppose they mean what is needed at the center of ruralization really is this framework for research and innovation. And a core part or a core element of this is the guiding concepts. And these help us explore what can support rural regeneration, what can support the ruralization project, and also look at the opportunities for new generations to come. Sorry, I'm not moving here. Oh yes, sorry. This is my fault, I'm sure. Okay, the deliverables in and around Work Package 3, a lot of these are already available on the ruralization website, so we're not going to concentrate too much on these this morning. But in addition to the conceptual guidelines that you can review online at the moment, we also produced, within the bounds of Work Package 3, we also produced a guide for practitioners. And this was really to help link the concepts to the experience of the practitioner on the ground. We felt that this was quite important to really break down some of the concepts and some of the ideas that might have been difficult to understand. So within the ruralization project and in doing this, in drawing up this practitioner's guide, we drew a lot of inspiration from the robust Horizon 2020. This was a multi-actor project, and they also used a guide for practitioners based on their conceptual framework. So we felt that this was quite a good idea as well in and around the ruralization project. So we developed this in Work Package 3. And the guide for practitioners, really what it does, it provides a quick guide to the ruralization project and the concepts that we used within ruralization. So those key concepts or those key ideas that are underpinning each of the core guiding concepts that we used, like regeneration, resilience, innovation, and capital frameworks. they're all underpinning ruralization, and they're all presented in the conceptual framework, but also presented in the guide, in the practitioner's guide as well. So the guide is structured in lots of respects, and it can be used as a full, I suppose, body of work, or it can be used in parts, and you can take elements of it as well that are relevant to you as a practitioner or as a researcher. So I suppose this brings us to this question of what is ruralization? And what becomes important here is that we distinguish the actual project ruralization, you know, as a time limited project that is funded and that we have a certain amount of time to do. But we distinguish this from the ruralization as a concept. And ruralization as a concept is really a process that we really wish to engineer and understand how to create. So ruralization in many respects is a concept, and potentially it can lead to a new paradigm of rural research. So in and around what is ruralization, a trend of unequal development exists. As I spoke about at the beginning of the concept of the conference, this unequal development, it exists between urban and rural areas. And economic activity is stronger in urban than rural areas or rural centres, as is population growth. So we have decided, and we have seen right across Europe, as many other researchers and political activists have also seen, that more balanced development is needed between the urban and the rural. So the ruralization process, it really aims to act as a counterforce to this idea of urbanization, to weaken this trend of a dominant urban. So ruralization, it promotes development towards a new rural frontier, and this is what we're trying to do. And it offers new generations kind of a stimulating opportunity for economic and social sustainability within this rural context that a lot of us work in. So in doing this, ruralization then turns this current, I suppose, negative spiral of decline into a positive spiral for new opportunities in rural areas. And at this, I'm going to pass you on to Louise Weir, who's going to look at how we are, I suppose, realizing this idea of ruralization.
Thank you, Maura. Good morning, everyone. As Maura has outlined, ruralization is concerned with understanding how to facilitate rural regeneration and generational renewal across key focus areas. These key areas provided the basis of our research review that are in this deliverable, alongside barriers, supports, and those that can facilitate regeneration. I can only mention a flavor of them, but there is more details in the guidelines. So youth is integral to the rural regeneration, and keeping young people in rural areas or attracting them back to rural areas is vital to rural regeneration. The drivers identified as impacting the insufficient levels of rural youth can include a lack of youth return, ineffective transition from education to work, a weak youth labour market, or wider factors such as access to services or poor services availability. So questions then out of that emerged can centre on how do we improve the levels of youth staying in rural areas? And how do we improve the rural return migration? Options identified as a flavour is to strengthen the youth labour market, but also in tangent with that is to consider the quality of jobs that we offer so that we target the different age groups. It's a diverse group we'll be looking at. Improve conditions for youth entrepreneurship and improve the attractiveness, the idea of what rural is or what it has to offer to encourage youth to return. As I said, the caveat is, of course, this is not a homogenous group, and neither are rural areas, which is so heterogeneous. Ruralization aims to promote rural innovation by focusing on newcomers to rural areas. This review set out various definitions that there is a plethora of to refer to rural newcomers. But moreover, what this research did, it looked at the why, the who, and the where profile of the newcomer. Who are they? Where have they come from, and why are they moving? And from this perspective, it allows a deeper appreciation of the drivers, of the barriers, and then to identify the opportunities that come out of that. From the review of these, some questions that emerge: how do we then facilitate that rural newcomer? How do we engage them to become an active part in our rural communities? And when we think about the where that they have come from, we can explore then how can we harness the previous networks that they've had from their different areas? How do we create those regional links that may actually stimulate further innovation? Rural newcomers are a diverse group and all with different motivating factors. For ruralization, we need rural newcomers to be active members of rural areas and to participate in regeneration. So we have to look at how we can support these newcomers. We look at supporting the relocation elements, but also the long-term staying. How do we embed them within our communities? And that refers us to social integration. How do we create that environment that's supportive of the newcomer entrepreneurship? Sometimes that means looking at what is already within our rural communities. It might be upskilling the existing community to provide a labour market for that entrepreneur. Farm succession and new entrants into farming is necessary to support generational renewal and also innovation and entrepreneurship in farming. This is a complex topic, all of us sitting here will know that. And there are many issues were identified in relation to facilitating succession and additionally the new entrants into farming. The issues can be linked to the farm itself in terms of viability, ease of transferability, or need for succession planning. Other factors for new entrants can relate to the attractiveness of the farming profession itself, openness and integration of the receiving community, and other gender barriers. That's just a snapshot, but what it does is it signals many areas for exploration. But two, for example, include how to address the dual issue of succession and retirement, twin issues rather than singular. Are the needs of the new entrants and family successors different? And should we treat them differently? Potential pathways are linked to focusing supports towards both the entering and the exiting farmer. Perhaps more tailored supports focused on specific issues facing the new entrant and the successor will provide new pathways. Addressing the issue of access to land is a vital starting point and essentially fundamental to dealing with wider agricultural issues of decline. Barriers linked to access of land cuts across most of the key focus areas that were looked at in this research review. And they include, for example, land availability, land market, and financial capital assets. Also, of course, sociocultural factors, for example, an inherited profession, and what does that mean in terms of gender and new entrants for females? The questions may center on how to improve that land availability, how to enable secure land access, and to sidestep the high farmland prices that then inevitably may occur. But despite its persistence as an issue which plagues agricultural progression, evidence does exist and points toward potential ways forward to deal with access to land as an issue. We can see strengthening more novel avenues to access to land, maybe in public land ownership or community ownership as an example. Address tenancy laws to address land leasing as a secure means of access. Extra emphasis on opportunities for new generations of women is part of the whole ruralization aims. It is found that increasing women's economic participation has significance for rural economic regeneration and community development. The questions then, of course, arise: how do we create those opportunities for new generations? And moreover, how do we harvest potential growth that can be unlocked by overcoming traditional gender norms? An opportunity identified in the research, for an example, is building a new type of rural economy that presents a more feminized labour market. For example, maybe it's an opportunity to explore and support farm diversification for a female role within agriculture. Another is to unlink the role women can play in rural innovation, perhaps in the creative industries. When we promote return migration, of course, it's necessary then to recognize that females are not a homogenous group and that life stages have an impact on when females may return to our rural areas and what the motivations then are for that and how do we accommodate for that. Overcoming gender-related barriers to rural regeneration is essentially fundamental to unlocking the potential for women in rural regeneration. I'm going to pass you on to Aisling to move the presentation forward.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Louise. So for the final few minutes, I just wanted to kind of zoom out a little bit again. We've covered so many issues, just kind of touched on them in this kind of introductory presentation. But what we wanted to do was kind of zoom out again, look at those issues that Louise introduced us to, and try to draw some kind of core, more strategic areas that might be potential pathways for rural policy. And again, these are not, it's not comprehensive. These are kind of the issues that kind of we can draw together from this initial review of concepts and research that we did at the early stages of the project. So it doesn't reflect all the work done and all the discussions that we'll have in the next day or so. But I suppose these kind of two core areas that we identified was this idea of innovation. So rural people and the capacities that they have that are absolutely key to this ruralization process. And also rural places themselves in the kind of questions and issues that Louise spoke about. And there is this question of rural places and their attractiveness and livability for all these newcomers. So that's kind of another area that cuts across all of these issues that are within ruralization. So this question of innovation in rural places, as is kind of, I suppose, something that we hear a lot, innovation maybe more associated with urban places, but how can we recreate rural so it is as much associated with innovation as big cities? And innovation is so important in rural places because it plays so many different roles. We can jump to the idea that innovation is a source of development, growth, jobs, but there's so much more, that innovation itself through the process can itself be a catalyst for change that drives further change. And I suppose within this and within the context of ruralization, what is very core and what kind of comes out in terms of the groups that we're concerned with is the knowledge, the human capacities, the networks between people that are key, and this innovation environment, that without the correct environment, we cannot recreate rural places as the strong centers of innovation that will support this ruralization process. And within that, specific things you might think about are this peer co-learning that can happen between that older and younger generation, between the entrepreneur newcomers and the existing farmers. Also practice-based learning that is so important in a farming context, and that the connection with the soil and the place is where the learning, the really valuable learning happens. And also this idea of knowledge brokers. So maybe within the more formal places for knowledge creation, that there is a brokerage role there, that there are people in between that help that knowledge transfer to happen. And so within all of this, there's an ambition to embed innovation as part of rural culture, and that it's part of the way of life, that this is what we see within our conceptual and review process of the ruralization project as part of one of the central kind of strategic areas of future action. And within that, there are the rural capacities, the human capacities of people. And just kind of two key areas within our concepts, we very much looked at this idea of resources and capitals, and that it's not just the grants, it's not just the very much physical stuff, that it's the social relationships, it's the culture, it's the traditions, and it's both of these things that can be a driver of this innovation within rural areas. But it's not just having these resources, it's allowing them to create kind of synergies, and one thing leads to another. So if we have cultural capacity for, maybe it's a strong rural festival, maybe we need some financial resources to drive that. So it's about these stocks of assets flowing and driving this kind of innovation process. And the direction that this suggests for policy, again, we're not trying to be exhaustive here, we're trying to kind of, I suppose, set the scene, open the debate for the next couple of days. But I suppose within the current CAP structure, there's this agricultural knowledge innovation systems. So what this all suggests is the huge importance of this structure, but also the need for perhaps more locally led policies, So the likes of LEADER or EIP Agri, so that actors on the ground can use local knowledge, come together to really drive innovative change. And also within this, do we need to focus on the particular communities of concern for ruralization, those new generations? And also, again, this point of the need for spaces where innovation can happen, for the transfer and sharing of that knowledge. And also the question of, I suppose, funding and its time frame and the levels of funding. Can these innovation projects be projects of significant scale in terms of the amount of funding and the time frame that they operate on? Is 5 to 10-year projects maybe the thing that can engineer real change? And the policy outcomes emphasizing that all the things that ruralization is about, these new rural opportunities and the removal of barriers, be it for the socially excluded to be part of this ruralization process, or to create those new opportunities for those people. And the final kind of cross-cutting area we want to touch on briefly is this idea of rural places as attractive to live and work. And we need to kind of focus strategically on this to kind of reinvent the rural, whether it's an image problem or to actually build resources and kind of new services, new capacities, be it broadband, the physical to the networks between people in rural places. So all of these potentials kind of direct us towards this idea of potentially a focus on rural placemaking and within rural policy. You know, there are many, I suppose, potential approaches to this. A few there, potentially the smart village approach that is talked about a lot at the EU level. This idea of the 15-minute neighbourhood that is more an urban concept could transfer visioning, which is something that ruralization has concerned itself with, to create kind of future visions for rural places, or this idea of creative placemaking, that is it the cultural and arts community in rural places that can help to reinvent the rural. So finally, just to kind of draw together a few final strands and to bring us back to the theme of the conference of bridging the EU level with local level practices. So what does ruralization depend on? So from what I suppose we have raised so far, to draw some of these strands together, it's a variety of scales and resources at a variety of scales. And what we have seen through our case studies very strongly and through the existing research and concepts we reviewed is that context is a huge area that impacts the transfer and use of practices. So people and place are something we must analyse and understand further for ruralization. But also we can't be too, I suppose, locally focused, that we have to be outward and inward looking, that there are, I suppose, globally significant trends and policies from local to global levels that impact the capacity for ruralization. So that's it. Thank you very much. Maybe it is better if we go here because the external. Okay.
You're going to look at the fossil.
I close this and ask Thomas to share his screen. Yes, we would like to ask if you ask questions and answer, please go here because the external participant can hear anything.
Hello. I wonder if it's my turn. Can you hear me?
It's all I can. I'm not sure what is happening in the room.
Okay, let's wait and see.
We are here in the room.
Can I start?
Please.
Please, Thomas, start.
Okay, thank you. Now I heard it. Okay, hello everybody. Sorry for not being there. What follows is a very brief overview of the forest site analysis we have been doing in ruralization project. And the reason why Academic Futures research of forest site analysis is done is the fact that the more we design and plan and evaluate alternative futures, the broader access we get to new choices in the present. So if we don't plan for the possible futures, we make choices based on the past or based on the present. And so that's the reason for planning and assessing many kinds of alternative futures. What we have done in ruralization regarding forest site analysis is that we have consulted many types of contexts. We have identified many types of trends and assessed the trends in the contexts where they have been observed. We have made a dream inventory among the young people to find out their futures dreams in different contexts. And after these kinds of surveys, we have made the tricks in research. So we have made categorization and many types of analysis to come up with the trends and the dreams and the reports and the trend cards. I will show you soon. And as soon as we had all these trends and dreams, we get back to the regions where they came from. And we organized 20 regional workshops in which we assessed how to benefit from the trends and how to make the dreams come true in each of these different regions, to have some primitive ideas of the practices and the policies that would promote rural regeneration in each of the contexts. So that's what has been done. And now some first results. We tried to identify many types of trends, so mega trends, trends and weak signals in many kinds of areas from many types of sources. So scientific articles, research reports, local newspapers, any kind of material which would provide some insights what's going on. And we were able to identify 1,560 trends. And after the long analysis, we were able to synthesize these into 60 trend cards, which are looking like this. So there's the name of the trend, so description, type, whether it's a megatrend, trend, or a weak signal, some most common drivers, and some most common impacts observed in the contexts where the trend was identified. And you can access these trend cards at the website ruraltrends.eu. There's also a longer version of the trend cards, which includes more information about the type and the topics and the scale and the domain and the sectors affected, and also the significance for the rural areas. Some more extensive presentation of the impacts, and for part of the trends also some statistical information, for example maps. So that's what you can find at the website. That's our main product in the trend analysis. And just to make sure that all you will fall asleep, I will very quickly go through the names of the titles of the trends to give you an idea what we are talking about. So the megatrends: aging population, benefiting from globalization, benefiting from urbanization, caring for the environment, climate change, counteracting unequal development and rural decline, growing food demand, infrastructures, accessibility and connectivity of regions, migration patterns, and sustainability transition. So those were our 10 megatrends. And then our 20 trends: alternative food systems, changing gender roles, circular economy, digital economy, diversification of rural economy, diversification or specialization of farms to do main strategies, e-commerce, food security, food tourism, local paradigm, manifestations of new technologies, meaning and experience economy, multifunctional forests, policy incidence and effectiveness, remote work, rural business succession, rural in the social media, rural tourism, technology intensive farming, and transparency of the food system. So those are not as broad or effective as the megatrends, but these are important and effective in certain places or in certain activities. And then the 30-week signals, which are symptoms of change. Many of these are not that effective in Europe. They might be effective in some part of Europe, in some country, in some village, but they have a potential to upgrade into a trend or even into a megatrend later on. So care services, cheap rural housing and rural second homes, cooperatives and partnerships, community-based action, creative economy, degrowth, do-it-yourself movement, eco-villages, educational farms, food sovereignty, heritage tourism, integration of immigrants, micro and small units, multi-local living, natural and cultural heritage, new governance models, pandemics and epidemics, place branding, pop-up culture and gig economy, public goods, resilience, rural artisans, rural energy communities, rural hubs, rural lifestyle, search for better quality of life, self-sufficiency, sharing economy, smart solutions in rural space, social enterprises and entrepreneurs. So if you have a problem, you can consult our trend cards to find out the final truth, what to be done. Things to be remembered when you are working with the trends. We are observing, or we were observing the trends now. And of course, we are limited to the current setting, so we cannot possibly see that part of the weak signals will upgrade into a trend. Could happen quite rapidly. And some of, for example, the megatrends could set up a counter trend, or even the megatrends will die because every trend has an end. The urbanization rate cannot possibly go much beyond 100%, at least not in Europe. So a thing to remember that every trend has an end, so they also evolve over time. Another point is that the context is important, so the incidence of each trend can be quite different in different regions. For example, the incidence of remote work depends on the economic structure, on the infrastructure, on the organizational culture in different regions, in different countries. So it's not the same everywhere. And it's also an important point when you try to work with the trends. So that's very briefly about the trends. Then going to the DREAM inventory. So we made a quite large survey among the youth aged between 18 and 30 years in 10 countries and in 20 different regions. We were not able to make a random sample of this population, so we tried to make sure that we covered different contexts, different types of regions, And as you can see in the map, we used the 3 different types and 2 different types of regions in each country to make sure that the survey includes the diversity of regions and possibly also the diversity of respondents. What we asked was these 3 recipes. So the livelihood recipe, how do you earn your living? The accommodation recipe, where do you live, in which kind of a house, in which kind of a neighborhood, and the lifestyle recipe, how do you live, what's your lifestyle? And the obstacles. What are the main obstacles in realizing your dream? And some of the results we got, for example, if we compare the current place of residence and the dream place of residence of the respondents, and we could think that if these young people would move to their dream destination tomorrow, what would happen? Actually, all the densely populated areas would lose population in this age group, and the winners would be the rural areas. So the young people are dreaming about open space. Rural areas close to cities would be the main winners, but also the remote rural areas. So you can say that this is what the young people in Europe are dreaming about, because we didn't have the random sample, but we can say for sure that there's a potential for the rural areas to attract new young residents. And there were young people dreaming about all types of areas. So as you can see, there were young people dreaming about city centers, and there were young people dreaming about remote rural areas. And that's a good starting point to find out something what could be done. What we did with the results was, for example, this type of profiling of the areas as destinations for the dreams. So what was specific in the contents of the dreams targeted, for example, to city centers. In this way, it's possible to pick up a certain type of region, like, for example, if you are interested or living in the city centers and want to develop those, well, here is the content of the dream of the young people dreaming of this type of area, and trying to find measures to make these things come true would mean that there could be a potential to attract new young residents. What was going to the rural areas, what was specific in the rural areas close to cities was that, as you can see, there are not so many attributes in the different recipes compared to the other types of the areas. And this, I think, tells that those young people who are dreaming about these types of areas are really keen to get to this kind of a place, and the type of the work or the type of the house or the type of the lifestyle is subordinate to the wish to live in this type of an area. Young people dreaming about rural villages were very keen in local. So the local services, the local food, local community activities were in the key core of the dream. So along with, of course, many other things. And remote rural area, traditional rural professions, economic activities, but also modern, let's say, manifestations of remote work. So there were also different types of subgroups among the young people who were dreaming about different types of areas. And what was typical in the obstacles was that the more urban the dream, the more the obstacles were related to the young people himself or herself. Whereas the more rural the destination of the dream, the more significant obstacle the society. So this was a very clear difference between the types of regions. But you can study this and try to find out measures how to make the dreams come true. And then the last part was the assessment process, which was carried out in 3 different ways. We organized one international research conference with more than 100 participants. It was called Rural and Urban Futures, Place-Based Challenges and Solutions, and we got some quite nice insights also for our purposes. Then we organized 20 regional futures workshops with stakeholders, and with them we made ranking of the trends. So which trends could provide potential for each of the regions. And we also tried to figure out the actions and the actors to carry out the measures to make the dreams come true or to benefit from the trends. And finally, we organized 3 thematic workshops, and we tried to craft causal maps on rural employment, land use, and agency to find out the kind of the root causes for the challenges that we have in these 3 topics. And just to give you some highlights of the outputs, on the left-hand side, you can see top 5 trends by type of the area. Of course, these are only based on the assessment of few hundred people in 20 regions, so that's not the final truth, but it gives some idea about the differences in the profiles on the incidence of the trends. So for example, in the city areas, the top 5 trends would be alternative food systems, remote work, that's quite strange, natural and cultural heritage, cooperatives and partnerships, and place branding. Whereas if you go to the other end of the continuum to remote rural areas, the top 5 trends were assessed to be remote work, community-based action, caring for the environment, natural and cultural heritage, and search for better quality of life. So this indicates something about the regional incidence of the trends by type of region. Of course, there were also differences by country. You can read them in the report. And then we tried to figure out, well, starting from each trend, what would be the topics of action to benefit from the trend. And if you, for example, pick up remote work, you would need facilities and investments, promotion, and flexibility. So those types of measures would be the most important ones based on this assessment to benefit from this trend. And so this is a very kind of a broad outcome, but gives some idea about the actions that could be done. Finally, we synthesized the results of the assessment process into a kind of a potential matrix, which is just a summary of the top 5 things regarding the trends, dreams, and what could be done and who should be in charge. And what was significant here was that in more or less all the topics, trends, and different types of the dreams or removal of their obstacles, it was the public sector which was in main charge of the actions. So the stakeholders across Europe still think that if we want to get these things done, it's the task of the public sector. Citizens were mentioned, private sector were mentioned, non-profit sector were mentioned every now and then, partly depending on the topic, but they were not in the key role still. It's the public sector which should take care of the job. Okay, then some conclusions regarding the trends. As we expected, there is no silver bullet. There is no one trend which we could pick and say, well, here is trend which will bring out ruralization or rural regeneration or something else very positive. There are many trends. They are overlapping, they are counteracting, they have different incidents across the regions, and each region based on the local circumstances, the agency, the structure, what prevails, the vision should study the trends quite with a quite broad approach to find the set of trends which could be useful for each region. So the context is the key. Not there's no universal top 3 trends which would save the world. Dreams, we can conclude that the rural areas have a potential to attract new young residents. Many young people are dreaming about rural futures. We have done the same study twice before in Finland with quite large random samples, and the figure has been always looking exactly the same. So it seems to be quite stable, even though we didn't have the random sample here in this study. And all types of areas are targets for the dreams. So all the areas can try to pick up some ingredients of the dreams or study the obstacles of the dreams and try to do something for them, because there's a group of young people who have this region as the destiny for their dreams. And the assessment, what we could conclude with that, it's quite easy to look at the, let's say, first most obvious reasons or causes behind the challenges. Like if the farms have profitability problems, you could pay more subsidies. But if you try to go deeper into the root causes, of course, you will find quite tricky things like the culture, the attitudes, the urbanization. People do not have an intimate relationship with the rural, for example, and they are hard to change, but it quite often gives a better understanding what could be done and what could not be done, and what still could be important if you try to reach at the root causes. And also the public sector, it's an obvious address to ask something for the rural, but if you try to figure out other options, it could be more effective sometimes. Okay, that's very briefly what we have done in the Foresight analysis, and you can find the reports concerning the trends and the dreams at the website of the project, ruralization.eu. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. It was all clear for me. Question is whether there are questions. We have a mic now, so that may help. If there are questions from the room or from online, can also be. Are there any ones? There's a hand. Okay, please provide. Yeah. Yeah, whose hand is from? The one who have put a hand on, because there's only one, can ask a question. No? Are there any other questions, remarks? Many people here have worked hard on this to make this happening. Because, yeah, Maarten.
Thomas, great presentation. That's great. I was just wondering, you mentioned at some point that the more urban dream was the more personal, more rural dream, the more societal, social, political. Recognize that from our study as part of your dream. But you yourself, other than looking at what stakeholders said, suggest that needs for policy making, especially regarding the rural areas, the societal.
Could you hear the question?
Yes, I believe it was Martin, and he said the words rural and urban. For the other part, I didn't hear anything.
Let's rephrase me the question. It was about this idea of that in the urban areas, it was about the obstacles were for the dreamers themselves, and in rural, it was societal and etc. What does it say for policy making? The question a little bit where you already discussed in the end, but maybe that was the question. Put it briefly.
Okay. Yes. I think there are two explanations. The other one is related to the people. So the young people who were dreaming about the urban areas were younger than the people who were dreaming about the rural areas. And of course, if you think about people around 20 years and people around 30 years, the problems related to getting an education, getting a job, are more related to the younger than to the older end of this continuum. So it partly explains that the difference. Of course, if you think then about the rural end of the continuum, the economic activities are related to agriculture, forestry, fishing, tourism, and the policy plays a much bigger role in, especially in the traditional rural businesses, possibly also in, for example, in the infrastructures. And so it's another kind of explanation for the society to be so important in the rural part of the areas.
Thank you, Thomas. I think we have to move on to a very specific question, please. Oh, yeah. Open it. John Moran, your question is, may I suggest a generic format for local rural community and rural urban economic development? Do you have an idea, John, what this generic format will be, or do you have Thomas? Do you have an idea on that? I don't just.
Hello.
Hello, John.
Good afternoon. My concern is probably general and yet specific. We have all good intentions, all good plans, but we don't seem to have a structure in place that we can just move into an area and say, right, the 4 or 5 steps we need to take should have an impact. And my view on the thing is we should be looking at something as basic as the objectivity and the needs analysis. That's our starting point, right? And we need to look at our needs in terms of feasible practicalities and whatever. The second step back from that then is the structure needed to support that development campaign. We then need to look at the strategy. So we have the objectives, the structure, the strategy, right? Then we need to be looking at probably a budget, which is very, very important. Benchmarks in terms of, you know, evaluating the program in its progression. The other element we need to look at then is branding, because I think there are good work happening all over Europe, and they're like well-kept secrets. Nobody realizes the good that communities are doing. And it can serve then not as an ego tripping exercise, but to enlighten and advise other people, other communities in similar situations. This is what can be done. So I'm looking at a branding thing as a kind of a practical step forward. The benchmarking thing is a management tool. And I suppose the other strong element on this thing is training. We live in changed times and changed environments. So we need to re-educate ourselves as to the needs and the different needs of the marketplace. Because if we go back long before, when we were all living in prams, there was a company called Alibaba. Now I'm going back to the very early Alibaba. And the very early Alibaba was responsible for representing a lot of small Chinese manufacturers, right? Now, and that worked at the time. And I think that if we're looking at progress here in the European context, we're dealing with small urban or small communities that may not have the scale to get into the marketplace. But if we had a collective, you know, where 10 or 12 or 20 or 30 communities come together under a kind of a common marketing and umbrella, it gives scale and it gives impact, and hopefully it'll give a better market presence to the participants. And then, you know, better markets should result in better results. So that's the essence of my personal view on it, because we have a lot of good work going out there, but I think we have to optimize it. And the only way we can optimize it is have, as I say, the objectives, the structure, the strategy, the branding, the benchmarking, the training. Now, the training is very, very important because market needs have changed out there. We need to respond to them. So that's in essence where I'm coming from. I just think I'd like to throw that out there for discussion.
Thank you, but we don't have that much time for discussion. So
Oh, sorry.
at this moment, we have now, I give Thomas a short answer first, and then we move on towards a flash presentation of 6 projects in 30 minutes, which will be quite ambitious. So, Thomas, do you have a short answer, or do you, how does this relates to the future research you've done? Or?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think it makes a lot of sense. For example, the place branding, we had it in the trends, and it was part also of the outcomes of the assessment. And we in this project, we will use these inputs in the policy work package. So we are not now just taking the first steps into the direction that you were discussing to figure out what should be done at the policy level. Good points.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to the ambitious flash presentations. We have 6 presentations, and you call this Polyrural, Sherpa, Rural-Touch, Newbie, Desira, and the Moving Project. And Polyrural will start with Anthony Oliva from the 22 Systema, but the 22 will probably be pronounced in another language. But, Anthony, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, or good evening, everyone. So I'm going to go very fast in my presentation to try to accomplish our ambitious goal of 30 minutes. So I'm going to share a screen. Okay, so I'm presenting here a Polyrural project. Polyrural project is about foresight in rural areas. So I was very attentive to the previous speaker, Thomas Kummonen, and I found very interesting the approach you have given to the ruralization in the ruralization project to these mega trends, weak signals and trends. But anyway, our project was based in another approach. The project is about future-oriented collaborative policy development for rural areas and people. I'm not going to read this, but just to let you know that the project is focused on the foresight study, and we are using two techniques, especially this one, system dynamics modeling, that I'm responsible for in the project. So what we did was to use this tool, this system dynamics modeling, to help and to support the foresight exercise in 12 pilot regions all around Europe. Yes, these are the work packages where the tool and the methodology was especially used. Work package 3 in the Innovation Hub and System Dynamics Technology, and work package 5 to give support to this future rural outlook. How, and this is the basic ideas of our work in Polyrural, how systems modeling can help rural areas in two ways. The first one, understanding what is happening in rural areas. So what is the system, what is the structure, the network of a structure that is giving birth to the behavior that we are observing in the rural areas, and second, to envision possible scenarios to reach goals. This is the basic idea of our work from system dynamics modeling. We built a template, a system dynamic model template. We tried to fit the 12 pilot regions, pilot models into this template. 11 of them could be fitted into this template model, one couldn't. So we had 11 pilot models. Then, depending on data availability, we built 10 working models. One other didn't have enough data availability, so we have to leave it aside. And once we had built these working models, we are now in these days we are focusing on the experiment design, which is to focus on some policy and option scenarios. So we asked the pilots to choose policy options and scenarios. We are building for them an interface based on the working model, so that they can refine policy options, and then so they can test the model, they can see the impact, and then refine the policy options. Yeah, basically this was our project, and I'll be happy to clarify things or answer your questions afterwards. Thank you.
My idea is to clarify things after we have all presentations done, because then otherwise then we know how much time we still have. The next project we got is Sherpa. Elodie Sal from Ecorus will present it.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elodie Sal. I'm working at Ecorus, and together with my colleague Olivier Chartier, we are managing, coordinating the Sherpa projects. Thank you all for inviting me to this realization conference. So I'll try to be brief and present the work that we do in Sherpa. So first of all, Sherpa stands for Sustainable Hub to Engage with rural, into rural policies with all actors. So we started the project 2 years ago. We're halfway through. We still have 2 years. The main objective of the project is to gather relevant knowledge and output and outcomes from projects and research projects in the EU. And then following co-creation phase, we pick a topic, and then what we propose to for discussion into multi-actor platforms. So we have established 20 multi-actor platforms, and the main principle or philosophy that we have behind is that we want to have 3 communities that are represented in these platforms. So science, society, and policy. So we have 20 platforms, as I said, and we will establish 20 additional platforms early 2022. So in total, we'll have 40. And as I said, the way that we work is that we want to pick a specific topic together with the platforms also that they would discuss specifically based on the different results of EU research project that we have gathered on that specific topic, and then they come up with specific recommendations, which could feed then again the future rural, the agendas on research and on future rural policies. So last year, what we did is that we focused our work on the long-term vision for rural areas. So all the multi-actor platforms have worked on this specific topic and have tried to really think about their own vision when it comes to the future of their territory that they are covering. Some maps are covering a very specific region in European member states, or some are national, so covering the whole country. And we have synthesized all this work in a position paper on so the Sherpa position paper as a contribution to the long-term vision for rural areas. This year, some maps have decided to continue working on this topic, so they are undertaking a foresight exercise. So 6 maps are working actually on this specific topic, and we are very curious to see what are the different scenarios that they have also followed. We have based our methodology on the GRC scenarios. Some of you may have heard about them, but this was also contribution specific from the GRC to the long-term vision for rural areas. When it comes to more foresight, also type of task, we have also a specific task in the Sherpa project looking at that. So we have started actually working on the kind of meta-analysis of all the different studies that have been done at EU level, and looking at the specific methodologies and outcomes that they have produced. This would be a deliverable to be due in the second half of the project, so we haven't had something specific now finalized, but we are working on it. So that was in a nutshell. I skipped many things, of course, that we do within Sherpa, but this was the synthesis of what we do currently. And I'll be happy to reply to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Elodie. I think it's a very relevant project, but since we are moving just further and further and further, and now it's Heritage with Claudia De Luca.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, I hear you.
Hello. I'm also trying to share the screen. Can you see it?
I see your screen. Heritage.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It was very, very interesting so far, I have to say, and nice to see that somebody is meeting again. I mean, we are trying to, but we didn't manage yet to meet in person. I'm Claudia. I'm from the Department of Architecture at the University of Bologna, and I'm in the coordination team of the Heritage project. So we lead the project from here. I think we are in a stage that is a bit more advanced of most of the other projects. So we actually entered the first and final year of the project. So we have quite some results that maybe also somehow can link to the question that was raised before from John. So hopefully I'll be able to share a bit of that. We are a huge consortium, 39 partners coming from many places in Europe and also some outside Europe. I won't go into the definition of the diverse partner, but just to understand, there are some research centers and so-called knowledge facilitator partners and 19 case studies that have been selected either to study them because they have been good in rural regeneration, or either to basically try to replicate the solution there. Ruritage as a kind of a broader approach, I would say that many of the projects that work on rural development in Horizon, also because we have actually been funded by a call that was related to heritage. So what we've been asking for was to regenerate rural area through heritage and local resources. I see that was mentioned by Tomo before within one of the weak parts. So we are trying to make it stronger, let's say. But we do have, let's say, a very wide and a very broad understanding of heritage there. So this is, let's say, the paradigm. So we identify 6 drivers that we called systemic innovation areas that could actually support rural regeneration in Europe and beyond. These are pilgrimage and, let's say, also hiking sector. So everything that is related also with that kind of tourism, for example. Of course, sustainable rural food production. But we also looked pretty much into migration. We heard quite much in your project about depopulation. So, I mean, one of the things that we thought is that through heritage, we can actually improve the integration of migrants that in rural areas can be a huge resource, also in terms of population. Art and festival, we work with heritage, we work with culture. If we want young people to come back, we do believe that making this community a bit more vibrant and, let's say, culturally active can actually help very much in people to stay or to come back. Resilience, that is intended again in a very broad sense, so both resilience to natural disaster, we work with case study that had earthquakes or volcanoes there, but also more as a kind of a community resilience, and last, integrated landscape management that does relate, for example, with the integration and the management of ecosystem services in rural areas. What we did quite many things. I will go very fast. So we learned from our role models and we managed somehow to transfer, hopefully also in presence, to the replicators, the knowledge that we gain about how to regenerate rural areas. This knowledge was brought by the case study into their local communities. So we have 19 local rural heritage hub, we call it like that. There are basically communities that implemented more than 50 workshops with involving more than 6,000 people all over Europe. And we now have 19 actually strategies that are under implementation, 6 coming from the replicators, so let's say large demonstrators, and 13 coming from role models, so a bit softer action that are implemented. Here's some pictures just to say what we are doing. We are doing festival, we are doing hiking with children, we are doing migrants traineeship, and we are also working on the structural reuse of existing building. There is in our website many tools that have been developed that you can go and check the content of those, but we also have outputs on education. So we do webinar and also summer school and master. And at the very last, we also are working on various, let's say, policy documents. 2 of them are public. So the Thinking Beyond COVID-19 crisis that also contributed somehow to the long-term vision of rural areas. But then we have some policy recommendation really directed to regions. And together with UNESCO, that is a partner of the project, we are working on a white paper for putting cultural and natural heritage a bit also like beyond, let's say, Europe. I hope it was clear enough. Thank you very much. And yeah, hope to have a nice discussion later on.
Thank you, Claudia. I think it was quite clear. And you were in the last year, you said it from presentation. Now we are going even to, I think that Newbie is even close. Leah in Finland, you presented, and she knows more about it than I do. So please go ahead, Leah.
Sorry, I really couldn't make out what you just said. Was that oriented towards me?
Yes, you can start.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, hello, I'm Leanne Sutherland. I'm here from the Newbie Project. I'll just get it up onto the screen, hopefully. Is everyone seeing that all right? I
Yes.
think I heard a yes. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm Leanne Sutherland from the James Hutton Institute. I'm on the management team of the Newbie project, but I'm not the coordinator. So Andres Visser from Wageningen University sends his apologies, and I'm standing in for him today. So Newbie is a thematic network, which means it's not a research project. It's very much about it's a coordination and support. So it's really about bringing together the existing materials on new entrants to farming in Europe. So as you can imagine, we have partners from across Europe, fairly typical of Horizon projects. I don't think I need to convince any of you, particularly after the kind of presentations we've had already today about why it's important to do work on new entrants. So I'm just going to skip ahead to what it is that we've actually been doing. So the focus of the Newbie project has been on developing a network of new entrants. So we've been doing a lot of networking activities that I'll take you through, collecting the state of the art. So drawing on some of the materials that you folks have already put together, but hopefully in reverse, you'll find it interesting, the things that we've been working on, because Newbie actually finishes this Christmas. So it's a 4-year project that we started nearly 4 years ago now. So one of the things we've been doing is awarding Best New Entrant Farm of the Year in each of our 9 countries. So that's been 3 awards per country. So that's why there's 27 in total. And we've got a lot of examples of those on the website. The idea is very much to highlight good practices that are out there and practical stories that other people can learn from as they're coming into the industry. We've also organized what we call discussion circles. So these are activities, any kind of group discussion where you have a facilitator and experts speaking about new entrants. As we've heard from Louise earlier today, access to land is obviously one of the big issues facing new entrants. So that's been the most popular topic for the discussion circles that we put together. But we've done other ones, obviously, on business models, farm succession, that sort of thing. Altogether, we think that there's been more than 5,000 people participate directly in these discussion circles. We've also had a number of international exchanges. As you can imagine, COVID threw a bit of a wrench in that particular work, but we just started doing exchanges again with some to France a couple of weeks ago, and it's been a fantastic learning opportunity. The value of the exchanges is the individuals that we bring go home and then act as ambassadors. So here in the United Kingdom, for instance, we sent some people over to France to learning about farming incubators, and they've come back and instigated farming incubators here in the UK. We did a fair bit of literature review because there are some academics like myself involved in the project, but looking particularly at what's going on in higher education for new entrants to farming, but also in how we're educating our advisory services. And what we found is that actually there's not much in the way of curricula specifically addressing farm succession and new entrants, at least in the 9 countries across Europe that we looked at. And we think that that's a particular problem. So we have developed some pedagogical materials specifically to help with that. What we are finding is that the colleges and universities tend to focus on technologies and technical expertise in terms of production, rather than thinking about some of these softer processes associated with how you get into the business, develop a good business plan, or just enable farm succession, for example, through joint ventures. So these are some examples of our pedagogical materials. They're all on our website, so please do go to the website and have a look. That will be up on the slide at the end. We have a lot of good, we have 90 good practices. So we have stories from 90 farms across Europe. That's the map that they're located on. Again, you can find those on our website for inspiration. In terms of some of the things that we're finding that new entrants, as you can imagine, are particularly vulnerable in their first few years. And that's because they're just getting started. They don't necessarily know what they're doing. They've had to make a fair bit of capital investment. Maybe they're learning to do something new. And this is when they can particularly use support. In terms of the business models, because that's one of the things that we're particularly keen on promoting in Newbie, we find that the business models of successors are very different from the business models of ex novo new entrants. So successors, for instance, as you can imagine, tend to carry on the family business much the same way that it has been, but potentially add on a diversification activity on the side to kind of carve their niche, but they don't tend to take the farm in a whole new direction, for instance. In terms of newcomers, so people that are brand new to the industry, that's where we see a lot more creativity in terms of differentiation and diversification. And a lot of that is just the pragmatic reality that they have difficulty accessing land and they haven't got a lot of money. So they need to do things that are different from the kind of intensive commercial production that we see on well-established long-term family style farms. We have quite a lot of stories. So we've put together, I think, almost 100 videos now looking at different new entrant models. And this is where individual new entrants themselves are talking about their business model. And we think this has been quite successful because you'll see that some of them, have kind of 40 or 50 views, but we have others that have had several hundred and actually up to a couple of thousand for some of our more popular videos. So we think this is a way that's really reaching new entrants as they're coming in and learning about their business sector. Okay, in terms of policy recommendations, we didn't study this specifically, but there were some things come from our steering groups. So each of our countries has a national steering group that gets together twice a year to decide topics for exchanges, new entrant awards, that kind of thing. They're particularly keen on low interest loans, which may seem a bit strange given interest rates have been so low this last few years, but why it's important is because they're not necessarily low interest rates available to new entrants. New entrants are still really struggling to access money. So guaranteeing low interest loans is something that can actually really help. Tax incentives are particularly important for people leaving the sector or enabling new entrants to come into joint ventures. And then advisory service, getting information and support particularly, and those first new groups, new years of starting. So that's about what I have to say for you today. Do pay a visit to our newbie website to get inspired. It's newbieacademy.eu, and we've got a strong Twitter presence as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. It's well wonderful having all this information about this projects going on, and I think we are going to manage because we are now at Desira. I think is Gianluca there? Yes, he's there.
Yes, hello everybody. Nice to see you. Actually, thank you very much for inviting me. I will be very brief, but I would like to stress some main messages of Desira. As you may know, Desira means digitalization, a socio-economic impact of digitalization on rural areas. So we want to see the positive and negative effects of digitalization. And on this regard, our starting point is that digitization is different from digitalization. And this distinction is important for us because we can see the effects on the social sphere of digitization, which means the shift from analogic to digital. And as the impact of digitalization can be either positive, but also negative, that there could be losers and winners, etc. We want that digitalization is beneficial for rural areas and for agriculture. And on this regard, we want to link digitalization to the Sustainable Development Goals. In order to do this, we have to start from the, let's say, the statement that digitalization is a socio-technical transformation. This means that any change in the digital sphere will affect also the physical sphere and the social sphere. And for this reason, we have conceptualized let's say the concept of a socio-cyber physical system. And this is our main analytical tool. And with this, we want to analyze in 20 living labs the system as it is now. So we have assessing the needs, the expectations, and also the impact of a past digitalization process in given rural areas. And we want to check how the digitalization will impact in the next 10 years. For this reason, we have done an analysis and assessment of the areas of the living labs in different types of domains. So in agriculture, in rural areas, and in the forestry. And the next step will be to carry out foresight exercises to see whether some digital tools that may become digital game changers will affect the life of the actors involved, and to what extent they will be able to reach the sustainable development goals. So after having done this foresight exercise at different levels, because we do foresight levels at Living Lab level, but also at European level, we will start, let's say, designing policy options and policy roadmaps with the intention to give rural communities and rural actors the instruments to design strategies that are tailored to the characteristics of the rural areas and of the context where they live. So on this regard, we try to overturn the approach that sometimes we see in the policy and the public sphere that consider technologies as the solution of everything. We think that technologies can help, but we have to start from a good and deep analysis of the problems at the rural level, at community level, or at farm level. And only with this, we can design technologies that are tailored to the characteristics, and they are likely to contribute to sustainable development goals. And with this, I would like to thank you.
Thank you as well. It was a nice introduction to Desira and the topics you are addressing. Now, last but not least, I want to move on to Moving, which is a project which is on mountainous areas. And we have two presenters, Mar Delgado and Sherman Farhad. Mar, are you starting?
Yes, I am. I will present.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen, I guess? And you hear me, right?
You and your screen very, very tiny.
Sorry?
I can see your screen very tiny in the corner.
Very tiny.
Yes, yeah. Maybe I can make it bigger.
I don't know what's wrong.
No, I see it well.
All right.
I see it full screen.
Okay, thanks, Claudia. Okay, yes, I'm Mar Delgado, project coordinator of Moving. Thanks for this invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And as have already been mentioned, Moving is a project on mountains. So Moving stands for Mountain Valorization through Interconnectedness and Green Growth. And the project main objective is to build capacities and co-develop relevant policy frameworks across Europe for the establishment of value chains that contribute to resilience and sustainability of mountain areas, to climate change and maybe other threats. So the key words are value chains to enhance resilience and sustainability in our mountains. Oh. Okay, so I will go quickly through this. We have to identify socio-ecological factors that will shape the future of mountain value chains by 2050. We aim to support policy designs designed to enhance the resilience of mountain regions, always focus on value chains. We aim to create a community of stakeholders to foster the exchange and knowledge of experiences. And you are very welcome to be part of our community of practice, as I will explain later on. So what we are trying to do is first to know what are the value chains and the value chain diversity in European mountains with a socio-ecological system approach. We will analyze in depth the value chains in 23 case studies that we call our mountain reference regions. We will do a cross comparison to analyze the potential of these value chains. And we will also organize a multi-level foresight analysis to develop the future perspective of these areas. And with all this, our objective is to do a good policy analysis and roadmap that could highlight what are the needs of European mountains. As I said, we have 23 reference regions in 16 European and neighboring countries, and that is our community of practice. We aim to create a community of practice with a science society policy interface. And for that, we have created what we call a MAP multi-actor platform. We have one in each of our regions of analysis. And we will create a European level multi-actor platform. And here you are very welcome to contribute, to be part of our discussions and to give us or to share with us the knowledge you are developing in your projects. We have several ways or several levels of participation in this community of practice. We have a core group, we can have active participants, but we also can have occasional, peripheral, or even transactional participants. But our idea is that this community of practice will last, will go beyond moving and will be part of our legacy. And what do we expect? We have been working for 1 year. I think we are the younger project, the youngest project in this meeting. And for a moment, we have already done an inventory of value chains with more than 450. And now we are analyzing what are the main vulnerabilities these areas are facing, right? We will do the foresight, as mentioned. We will develop methodologies, tools, indicators, and so on. We are also starting to do the susceptibility and vulnerability maps to identify which are the main drivers that are creating challenges or threats in these areas. We have our community of practice, as I've already mentioned, and we will work in policy recommendations and a policy roadmap for all areas. And here you have all the information, our website. We will be very happy if you subscribe to our newsletter that is twice a year, and then you can have more information about what's going on or to follow us in the different social networks. So thank you very much. And I'm very happy to ask any question or discussion or whatever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mar. I think a big round of applause for all presenters because they did a very good job in very interesting and relevant set of projects. And now we have time to ask questions and discuss on it. And are there any first questions? I see Alice has a question. You can try it, but then you have to put it probably about in your mouth mask somewhere there. Because, yeah,
just a quick question to you, Anthony Polirural. You said, if I'm not mistaken, that you were building scenarios to achieve some goals in rural areas. So after like modeling, this is part of the modeling, you're trying to give directions to achieve some goals. I was curious of what goals, or how did you reflect that at your project level to define what you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, thanks for your question. In Polirural, we focused especially on population. So most of the goals were dealing with population issues, and especially with depopulation. So policy options involved normally policies related to economic development, being agriculture, tourism, rural economic diversification, etc., and how these policies, these actions were affecting population in the mid and long term. So basically, those were the goals analyzed by the pilots. I don't know if that was clear.
Okay, Nicole. Is this understandable for you? No. David.
No, I couldn't hear anything.
Yes, it's a comment and question for Newby. I really appreciate what you have said about the way you were trying to facilitate sustainable farms. But I wonder if you have understood that also for consolidating these farms, there are also the non-farm population living in the rural voisinage, neighborhood, and well, the relation between rural farms and rural population. Did you think about this even in the education way of facilitating and encouraging the sustainable farms?
Is this question clear? Leanne? It was to Newbie, I think.
No, I couldn't understand the question. I'm sorry, I can't hear very well from here.
Okay, the question was, to keep it shortly, what is the relation between those new generations, so new business models, these new farms, and the rural communities who are not farming and are next to them?
Well, I think as we've already heard in the presentations today, I mean, obviously new entrants to farming are not the only solution for rural areas, neither is agriculture the only industry in rural areas. But there's a general philosophy, I think, also embedded in ruralization that what is good for new entrants to farming is good for generational renewal. It's good for local rural economic development. It's helpful for keeping lights on, as we call it here in the UK, in rural areas, because it helps young people establish viable businesses. So they move to the area, their kids enroll in schools, their spouses get local work in other occupations. So although Newbie was specifically focused on new entrants to farming, so that was the focus, we focused on new entrant business models. I think it's, well, frankly, self-evident that that's something that's going to be beneficial for rural communities more broadly.
Thank you, Leanne. Are there any other questions, remarks? Okay, I step a bit. Questions? Yes. Oh, from John again. Please, John, maybe you can better tell it because you were clear to listen to. Your music, yes. Please, go on.
My only comment is, listening to the various presentations this morning, I'm amazed at the potential and the expanse of the expertise. The only concern I have really is that in order for solutions to be delivered, we have to consider the solution as a localized solution, because regional is fine, but essentially local needs can be recognized very quickly and solutions can be recognized very quickly. So if there's a fault or a flaw in the discussion today, is we just need to look at some mechanics or a channel to deliver on a more localized basis some of the solutions or all the solutions that have been highlighted here this morning.
Thank you, John. Maybe I take another comment and then we maybe give all presenters the floor to have their contributions to each others or to what they want to say. Are there any other questions, comments? In the back, front? Nobody? Then I give the floor first towards all 6 project presenters. Maybe they want to say something about the comment by John or some other comments they've heard or some other things they heard from the other projects. And I start with, again, with Anthony.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick comment about the last intervention by John about context and local. What we learned in our project in Polyrural is that we had this template model, which is thought for a conceptual rural area, but then you have to adapt it to local realities and local rural environments. They have many specificities that cannot be reflected in the template model. So our first, so we must. I mean, we did a strong simplification of the rural dynamics. As you can understand, we were at 12 pilots, so it was a challenge to match the template model to every and each of the pilots. So yes, local and context is something important, and so that's why we stressed that the system model that we built is just a tool to start a process, and this process has to be local. Yeah, that's my main comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Elodie, you also have worked with many maps, so also this kind of connections. And this works also in relation to this comments by Anthony or by John, or do you think there are other things which are coming to the foreground?
No, I fully agree with the comment made by John, and also building on Anthony's intervention. We really noticed during the different discussions held in the multi-actor platforms in Sherpa, the importance and involvement of local actors and local stakeholders from the beginning, from the design of the policies, but also in the implementation phase, and also the involvement of citizens. It may sound naive, but they need to be also involved somehow, and importance of governance. And I think that even at the European Commission level, the concept of rural proofing is also more and more discussed. So this is, I think, a good sign, at least a positive sign when it comes to future rural policies.
Thank you, Elodie. Claudia, do you have something also in relation to heritage? You have heritage versus local, and you have regional acclaimed, and you have local community around, and maybe that's also a different angle to have a look at this.
Oh, I mean, I think from my side, the main difference, I'm not sure, but from what I understood, most of the other projects are either research and innovation action or coordination and support. I mean, we are an innovation action. That means that we focused most of the budget actually on local areas and I mean, what we call role models and replicators. So that means that for us, I mean, our role has always been to provide them guidelines, to provide them with case studies, good practices, methodology, tools, but basically all the work actually took place at local level. So with a shared methodology that was provided by this so-called knowledge partner, but then the real actor of the project has always been the local community, with the mediation and coordination from the project partner at local level, but with a huge involvement of, I mean, when I say that there are 6,000 people involved, I mean, I think it's around 150 that sign partnerships with our local hubs. So like public-private-ish or private-public partnership, depending, of course, on the various role. So when we say complementation and co-development, I think that was one of the main things we have been looking at. And I think it was also in the nature of the project itself. No, there was having a great look at all that part. But what I was impressed, and I just want to mention about, is the huge amount of case studies and practices that we all collected in the project that we work with. I know that tomorrow DG Agri will be presenting. I think it would be very nice if you can also somehow redirect this to them, because I see that there's a lot of fragmentation. I mean, it's very hard for us to really study the practice that the other projects collected. It would be very nice, but it's, I mean, I think this should be taken up, no, from a more policy side, and then somehow digested and redeliver somehow to the local communities, because there's a huge work there, and it's hard for each of us coordinating our own project, no, to put this in a network. So thanks for the occasion to meet. But yeah, no, it would be good also to do something a bit more practical in terms of putting together what we all discovered. I don't know if it's the right word there.
Thank you, Claudia. I mean, we as an organization will, from April on, we will have 13 months of only policy analysis, assessment, policy development, and of course, the communication dissemination. But that is, all other work packages have stopped, and we are going full run for the policy. So that may be an opportunity to discuss and to coordinate this kind of aspects. Leanne, do you have some to add to this?
Well, I mean, I can certainly agree that it's really interesting, just the range of case studies and different approaches that have been taken. I've been really interested actually to hear about ruralization in the scenario process, and I thought that was a really interesting contribution I would love to hear more about. And I was curious, actually, this idea of rural dreams, if there were any observations on how COVID had impacted on that, because I think certainly something that we're seeing is a real appreciation for green space and living out in rural areas. And I'm wondering if that came through the scenario process at all, or if other people are seeing that in their projects as well.
In relation to this dream, this was begun to do it on site, but we had to move to online, and we have added a question on the impact of COVID on the dreams and also on the barriers on. So we have asked them, and the results were not, it was at that moment not overarching, when we done the research, it was in the summer, overarching impact on it, but you never know. But that was the dreams was for a small minority. But it's in the reports which are online, where you can read more in detail, because I have not prepared for an answer on this question. Maybe Thomas knows from heart. Gianluca, do you have something to add?
Yes, I would like to add that as DESIRA is starting from a methodology based on living labs, we really believe that the context is very important, also for digitalization. The problem, I think, is how to generalize, because we know that solutions that are fit to local levels when transferred to other contexts may be not fitting. So the problem for researchers, but also for policymakers, is how to generalize these results, how to create, let's say, general statements that go beyond the anecdotal evidence. And this is something that I think for researchers, but for policymakers as well, is a key aspect. I think that the process we are carrying out, so starting with the local level and then making comparison and having discussion at a higher level, it's a kind of a process that can be replicated. So we go from the particular to the general, and then from the general again back to the particular. And in this way, we can try not only to find the local solutions, but also to create a general framework that can generate a new, let's say, new initiatives in the field of rural innovation.
Okay, I think it's adds also to the idea of the obstacles of the dreams, but in rural reality, it's not yourself, but also the policy. So, and often these policies are at regional levels have an impact on. So it's good, I think, good to look at in these moments and levels. Mar, last but not least, again, you have.
Yeah. Okay. When you speak, you are the last is many things have been done, have been said. Sorry. Well, I think context is very important in our case, even more because mountain areas are like the most remote or quite often the most disadvantaged rural areas. So I think this idea of identifying value chains, innovative or upgrading value chains that can help these areas to face the different challenges they have right now, I think is quite important. And also the idea of working with multi-actor platform. But I would say one of the main difficulties we find in this context of mountain areas is how to engage people and how to maintain them for 4 years or even beyond, engage, working with you, giving you how to do our multi-actor platform so attractive that people really want to be working with us during 4 years. So I think that's a big challenge, and it's maybe it's even more difficult in these mountain areas. So we are trying hard. We are doing our best to try to organize these multi-actor platforms around the real problems they are facing. Yes, even if that means to, let's say, deviate a little bit of our main goals in the project, but we are really committed to give them something that is useful for their, let's say, daily life or daily work in mountain areas.
Thank you, Mar. It's indeed complex because you are, because people are indeed maybe asking what's in it for me after 3 years, and if you have to have 4 years, that's quite a, you have to give them something back, and that's something we are that's part of also where we are all working on. I think we come now to the end of your all. Wish you all getting an extra round of applause. I don't know if you're all here. I think the online session starts tomorrow morning at 9 or 9:15 for the first discussion room on rural generations. But offline, we have an excursion, something you can do at offline, go somewhere, look at somewhere, having a dinner together. But that's something which is very old-fashioned and old school, and we are trying to do it again. So thank you all for your contributions, and see you all tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.